Today's video, we will discuss the possibility of return of the dire wolf. For thousands of years, the dire wolf has existed only as a fossil memory of North America's past. It was one of the most recognizable predators of the Ice Age, larger and more robust than many modern grey wolves. When the dire wolves disappeared roughly 10,000 years ago, nobody could have imagined that modern biotechnology would one day attempt to recreate some of their characteristics. In 2025, the dire wolf became the center of a major scientific and public debate after biotechnology company Colossal Bioscience announced the birth of genetically modified wolf pups carrying selected genetic characteristics associated with the extinct dire wolf. The announcement was extraordinary, but it also created an important scientific question. Did scientists really bring the dire wolf back? The answer is more complicated than headlines suggest. The dire wolf was an extinct canid that lived in North and South America during the Pleistocene. Fossils show that it was a powerful predator with a body structure different from that of the modern grey wolves. For a long time, scientists assumed that dire wolves were closely related to grey wolves. However, ancient DNA and genomic research changed this picture. Scientists discovered that dire wolves represented a much more distinct evolutionary lineage than previously thought. This discovery is extremely important for understanding de-extinction. To create an extinct animal, scientists need genetic information from that species. Dire wolf fossils have provided researchers with ancient DNA fragments. These fragments do not represent a complete, perfectly preserved genome, but they can provide valuable information about the extinct animal's genetic characteristics. Scientists can compare ancient dire wolf DNA with the genome of living canids, particularly grey wolves. By identifying genetic differences, researchers can determine which genes or genetic region may have contributed to characteristics associated with the extinct animal. This is where modern genetic engineering enters the story. Instead of simply finding a complete dire wolf genome and cloning it, which is not currently possible, researchers can potentially modify the genome of living relative. The basic idea is fascinating. Take a living wolf as the genetic foundation, identify selected characteristics associated with the extinct dire wolf, and modify particular genetic region. The resulting animal could then display some physical characteristics that resemble those of extinct species. This approach is very different from the traditional cloning. When people hear the word de-extinction, they may imagine a perfect genetic copy of extinct animal emerging from a laboratory. But that is not what happened with 2025 dire wolf project. The animals produced by Colossal were genetically modified grey wolves carrying selected genetic changes instead to produce dire wolf-like characteristics. That distinction matters. A genetically modified grey wolf is not necessarily a resurrected wolf. This is one of the most important scientific issues surrounding the story. What does it actually mean to bring a species back? If an animal has some characteristics of an extinct species but does not possess its complete genome, behavior, developmental history, and evolutionary background, should we call it the same species? Or should we call it a proxy, a living animal engineered to resemble an extinct species? Scientists and philosophers continue to debate this question. Consider a simple example. Imagine that scientists genetically modified a horse to give it stripes similar to zebra. Would that animal become a zebra? Obviously not. Its appearance might resemble a zebra, but its genome, evolutionary history, physiology, behavior, and ancestry would remain different. The same principle applies to de-extinction. A direwolf like animal may have selected characteristics associated with the extinct species, but that does not necessarily mean that the original extinct species has been restored. However, scientific achievement remains important. The technology demonstrates how researchers can use ancient genetic information together with modern genome editing techniques to investigate extinct characteristics. This could eventually have implications far beyond the dire wolf. Researchers interested in de-extinction are also studying species such as woolly mammoth and other animals like Tasmanian tiger. The basic strategies may differ between species, but the general concept involves understanding the extinct genome, identifying a suitable living relative, and using biotechnology to introduce selected characteristics. But why would scientists want to do this? One argument is conservation. If genetic technologies become sufficiently advanced, they might help restore loose genetic diversity or strengthen populations of endangered species. For example, genetic technologies could potentially help species that have suffered severe population decline by introducing genetic diversity or useful traits. De-extinction research may also produce technologies that benefit living endangered animals. However, critics argue that bringing extinct animals back could distract attention from species that are still alive. There are thousands of threatened species today. Many are disappearing because of habitat destruction, climate change, pollution, invasive species, overhunting, and other human activities. If we spend enormous resources recreating extinct animals while allowing animal species to disappear, we may be addressing the wrong problem. This creates a fundamental conservation question. Should we bring extinct animals back, or should we concentrate on preventing extinction in the first place? There is also the question of habitat. Suppose scientists successfully create an animal that was genetically very similar to a dire wolf. Where would it live? The ecosystem that existed during the ice age have changed dramatically. Climate has changed. Prey populations have changed. Landscapes have changed. Human populations have expanded across much of the former range. The ecological conditions that supported the original dire wolf no longer exist in exactly the same form. An animal is not simply a genome. It is part of an ecosystem. Its behavior, prey relationship, predators, parasites, diseases, competition, reproduction, and social structure all contribute to its ecological identity. This means that de-extinction is not simply a genetic problem, it is an ecological problem. There are also animal welfare concerns. If scientists create genetically modified animals for research or conservation purposes, those animals must be treated according to appropriate welfare standards. Researchers need to consider whether genetic modifications could produce health problems, developmental abnormalities, reproductive difficulties, or behavioral challenges. Creating an animal should never be viewed simply as a technological achievement. The welfare of the resulting animal must be part of decision making process. There is another fascinating issue: behavior. A dire wolf was not simply a large wolf. Its behavior evolved over thousands of generations in a particular ecological environment. We do not know exactly how dire wolves communicated, hunted, raised their young, or interacted socially. Fossils can tell us a great deal about anatomy, while ancient DNA can reveal genetic relationships and some biological characteristics, but behavior is much harder to reconstruct. If we create an animal with some dire wolf like physical traits, we cannot automatically assume that it will behave like an actual dire wolf. There is another reason why the phrase de-extinction require careful attention or interpretation. Nevertheless, the project demonstrates something remarkable about modern biology. Scientists are increasingly able to move between different layers of biological information. They can study fossils, extract ancient DNA, sequence genome, compare evolutionary relationships, identify important genetic regions, edit DNA, and monitor the resulting animals. This represents an extraordinary convergence of paleontology, genetics, evolutionary biology, molecular biology, reproductive biology, and biotechnology. For zoologists, this is particularly fascinating because it connects fossil records with living organisms. Traditionally, extinct animals were studied primarily through fossils. Now, ancient DNA provides another window into their biology. Instead of asking only what an extinct animal looked like, researchers can ask questions about its genetic relationships and evolutionary history. The direwolf story, therefore, has value even if we ultimately decide that genetically modified wolves should not be described as restricted direwolves. The direwolf may therefore represent not the end of the extinction, but the beginning of a new scientific era, one in which humans have unprecedented ability to manipulate the genetic legacy of life, and that give us an enormous responsibility, because once humans gain the ability to rewrite biological history, the most important question is no longer simply can we, it becomes should we, and for what purpose. For more videos related to animals and animal fact, do not forget to like and subscribe our channel Zoosphere.